Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air. Today I am joined by Andy McCreadie. He is the MD at Sandler, just up the road from me. So in our neck of the woods down here in the South West, but somebody I've known for a few years and who has some really credible views on salespeople, sales teams, growing out a sales team. And today we're going to be talking about exactly that. What are the challenges that salespeople and sales teams face as they grow? Why do salespeople fail? What do they get wrong, and what can they do differently? I'm really looking forward to getting into topics. I think we'll have a lot to chew in that conversation, Andy. But first and foremost, welcome to the show. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Owen. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to chatting more. We like to give our guests 2 minutes right at the top, because though some people listening or watching might know you, others won't. So if you could tell our audience, who's Andy, who is Sandler, that would really help us.
All right. Well, so I am been running a business for 16 years. I live here in Devon. I got a couple of kids who take up a lot of my time. The rest of my time I put into running the business, working with my clients. I live in the Southwest for a reason, which is I like to go sea swimming and biking and surfing. And so I try and blend those different things as best I can. I think achieving that kind of balance in life is the most important thing to me. And I think most business owners get that wrong. They put the emphasis far too much on work, and maybe family and health and so forth takes a second and third place. And I think trying to get that balance right has always been my focus.
Nice. And how about Sandler? Tell us a bit about Sandler.
Yeah, so we're a sales and leadership training and consulting business. So fundamentally, we help companies grow through optimizing sales team performance, management performance, leadership performance, implementing systems and best practice processes across those different groups. Been doing that, 16 years now. So, still learning, but getting a few successes along the way. So it's been a good business for a while now.
I've seen some funny stuff over those 16 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a marathon, isn't it? Running a business, and you every day is a school day. We're in the learning bits, and so we always try and use what we teach and practice what we teach. We're obviously always getting stuff wrong ourselves, and that's part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, let's get into topic. Thank you for that context. I think I want to start with something that's probably quite broad, and let you just guide me as to where you want to go with this, around that moment in a business where you think, right, I'm going to start hiring some salespeople, start growing it out. And whether you're a sales leader and you come from a sales background or not, it's certainly not a smooth road to success. And there's a big assumption that we can just plonk a couple of salespeople in and off they go, and we'll start to get some success, and they'll pay for themselves very quickly and all the rest of it. Yeah. I'm just maybe keen to get your view on, like, what are the common things that go wrong in that phase, and why does that not work? Why isn't it as simple as it could or should be?
Yeah, good question. A lot of reasons. So if you think about any growing business, usually the owner is the salesperson at the start, right? Mm-hmm. And normally they're not bad at it, because they've got the passion and the drive, and they're the owner, and so they've got this kind of unconscious competency, as it were, and so they think, well, now I don't want to do that, so I'll hire someone. Normally hire like an experienced veteran who comes in with the CV and the apparent track record, and the black book, often got all the contacts, bring them in, throw 50K a year at the person, whatever, and then a year or two passes and they're not there anymore, and they didn't deliver. And that's a story I've heard so many times in the last 16 years. Why does it happen? I guess because those people often bounce from job to job every 1 or 2 years. So they've built a CV of sorts, but they never really achieved any sustained success, because selling is really hard. It's a tough role. It's a tough profession. and many salespeople just lack the skill set to do it well, or the personal attributes to do it well, but they've kind of fallen into it, and it's their job. But it's not like, you know, doctors and engineers who actually get this formal, you know, education in how to be a doctor or an engineer. It just, people fall into it. There's the expectation that they should just go make it happen, but that's not realistic, because it's challenging. And that's why most salespeople fail, because kind of that wing it approach, the salesperson's winging it. You know, the manager who hired them, they're winging it because they don't really know how to hire and manage salespeople. Everyone's kind of winging it, and it's a tough role. So that formula just doesn't add up and equal success very often, except maybe where you've got an unbelievable product or an unbelievable, you know, service or whatever, and it kind of sells itself and the market's strong, you know, so there's lots of inquiries and people are buying, and salespeople are maybe kind of taking orders and successful, but it's not maybe through effective selling. It's because the market and the product, you know, was advantageous, shall we say.
I'm interested to pick up on something. So in that example you use, where we bring in the, you know, really experienced salesperson who's got the CV, all that, we've all been there, we've all seen it. One of the things that's happening in that example is that you're bringing somebody in for sales as a whole skill set. Now, sales is a broad thing, right? So it's everything from creating and opening the door at the top of funnels through to negotiation with procurement on big deals, where, you know, you might be in talking to commercial leaders and negotiating on really complex legal matters or clauses around the relationship. And there's a lot of ground to cover in between. Yeah. Surely the assumption that someone can be good at all of those things is a fairly naive one.
Yes, it is. Some can. Most are better suited to part of that process. So if we look at a couple of examples, right? Some people listening will sell in a short sales cycle, right? Could be one meeting, one conversation, and there's a yes or a no. Other people listening, you know, we work with clients in aerospace or selling, you know, high value technology, which is a massive implementation for a business. That could be like a 6 or 12 month sales cycle with, you know, 20 meetings, right? Some people are going to be good in a short sales cycle and terrible in a long sales cycle. Other people are going to be well suited to the other way around, right? So we've got to understand which individual is suited to a short or a long sales cycle. You could also look at hunting and farming, right? You know, growing an existing account is quite different to going out and looking for brand new ones. You know, you can find individuals who have the sort of personal attributes for both, but generally speaking, someone's going to be suitable for one or the other or neither, right? And we do a lot of profiling of sales teams, and often we find that people who have been hired are, frankly, they're not right for either. They're just a bad hire. So a hiring process that was used to assess them was generally, you know, pretty lightweight and not rigorous enough to filter out the wrong people. So yeah, and some people are good for the lead gen piece, but they're maybe not good for the qualifying and progressing and closing and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we can't look at sales as sales. We've got to understand what type of sales and which part of the process, and then fit people into the right part.
Need to be careful not to profile too much, but I'd also argue that if somebody is good at both and they are experienced in their career, it's probably a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? In the, you know, if they're still applying for sales roles and they've been around in sales a long time, if they were exceptionally good at all the skills that you need in sales, they probably would have gone further than that by now. And you're almost finding early career people who have got that potential to be that, so you get them in and shape them.
Generally, I would agree with that, right? Because surely if you've been like unbelievable at selling, you should now have progressed into some different role. But of course, some salespeople aren't going to be good sales managers or sales leaders. So that progression isn't necessarily the right one. I have worked with salespeople who are still in sales after 20 years because that's what they like and they're really good at that. and they earn a lot of money because they earn commission.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, in some cases, if you've got a veteran who's still applying for a certain type of sales role after 25 years of selling, you should ask the question, why are you, without demeaning your own vacancy, why are you applying for this role? This level of money that I'm offering. There's probably a reason for that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That whole piece around fit and understanding the why somebody is there, why somebody wants to do something. And you touched on something earlier around people falling into sales. And this is one of my real passions and something I'd love to, by the time I get to retirement, love to have contributed to the change of, which is around people not falling into sales anymore, but actually it being an educated choice through the system, teaching people that sales is a skill, sales is a profession, and that we can lead people towards sales as a career choice because they're a fit for it rather than because they fall into it. And I think that's it's an interesting point that you made around people are there because they fall into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good in it. I guess you've got to learn a way to identify the difference, because we are still in that world where people fall into it as a default choice because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, that does happen, and you're right. Selling, we live in the world of sales, so I'm sure we both see sales as a profession and a tough profession. But I think most people out there maybe belittle the challenge of sales or the role of sales. Many people. But thinking about what selling involves, especially if you're more on the kind of hunting side of sales, going out there into a big, marketplace. To try and get time with really busy people, senior people, where there's a lot of noise and you're another piece of noise, to get time with the right people and identify a reason to have a meaningful business conversation and, progress that through over a whole bunch of hurdles to actually be entrusted with some crucial part of their operation, their business. And for them to, give you a whole chunk of their money, and sign potentially a long-term contract, there's a lot of challenges in that whole journey, and actually we sometimes talk about, going into a knife fight with a banana is going to end badly, and most people in sales, they're going into knife fights every day with a banana, as their toolkit, that's gonna hurt, and that's going to be discouraging at best, very painful at worst. It's
an analogy I haven't heard before, I must admit.
I don't have much original material, very little, but that's original material. Yeah.
Love it, absolutely. I'm a fan of an analogy, and creative ones like that go a long way for me. So I'm sure that will stick. Keen to understand around, I guess some of the mistakes that you see sales leaders make as they're growing a sales team. So I know we can focus on the more tactical, what are reps doing and what can they do better, and we'll get onto that. But what are sales leaders doing? What mistakes are they making? What are they doing well in the environment that we're working in at the moment?
Yeah, okay. Well, if we take first of all the sales leader as the kind of business owner, I think a common mistake is they hire in a salesperson and effectively delegate away responsibility for sales to this expert, right? Yeah. Which happens a lot, but I see that as effectively saying, you are now responsible for the success of this company, right? And when that goes badly, we're a year down the line, we haven't grown sales, and now the owner's holding the baby again, right? And nothing's gone forward except they've blown 100 grand on a salesperson for a year or whatever they pay. So I think the first thing is that sales leader needs to understand how to lead and manage that salesperson or those salespeople. So they need to understand, how do I interview a salesperson? How do I assess them to really figure out if they're the right person? How do I onboard them? How do I coach them? How do I hold them accountable? So that you're not delegating away responsibility. You're bringing someone in to assist you and to maybe do that day-to-day sales effort, but you have systems in place to oversee what they're doing and manage what they're doing, so that if they're not doing what they should be, then there's appropriate steps that can be taken before you've invested a year of your time in the wrong person. And so I think if a sales leader or business owner doesn't have that, that knowledge, as it were, in sales leadership, then they should go out and find that knowledge, acquire that knowledge, so that they retain responsibility for the person that they're hiring.
Yeah, really interesting. And it's you touched on something earlier around the founders probably winging it, but they've got this superpower they're the founder, right? And you cannot replicate that. And it's understanding, like anything, the theory behind why something works or doesn't. So if you're just good at something, you've no idea why. You can't scale, you can't replicate, you can't teach, you can't coach. You've got to almost take a step back and look at what you're doing and what bits work, what can be replicated, what can't be replicated. And this comes back to the basics, right? Process, systems, people, understanding the difference between a good and a bad person, culture. So what's the culture around expectations and targets and activities and reporting back and those sorts of things. And I think one of the phrases that somebody taught me a few years ago that's always stuck in my head is like, what you measure you can manage. So it's like, are you measuring the stuff that's happening? Have you got the data in front of you that tells you what that person is doing or not doing that can help you to make forward thinking decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. And that you've shared a good example there of tracking what someone's doing. Most businesses will track results of a salesperson, but what is it that drives those results, right? Because if you've got, let's say your sales cycle is 6 months, right? It typically takes 6 months between hello and let's get married. Then let's say it might take your new salesperson 6 months to rustle up a few leads, and then another 6 months to get to the point of being able to close one. They're a year in before we see any results. So if that's all you're tracking, how do we track success in the first year, right? So let's look at some behavior metrics like, how many people are they talking to per day? How many times are they picking up the phone, or how many initial discovery meetings, business conversations are they having with an on-profile, individual per week, per month, So having some targets around some kind of, what we would call leading indicators, right? Behavioral metrics versus lagging indicators, results, gives you an early indicator of, is this person on track? So yeah, that would be an example of good sales management versus the kind of hope it works out well management.
Can you learn to be a good salesman if you've not been through being an individual contributor, having a revenue line on your head in somebody else's business, running a sales team, which takes time to learn? Can you be a good founder and then be a good sales manager as well, unless you've done that before?
Some can, some can't, I would say. So one of the things we find with training salespeople and sales leaders is that not everyone's trainable. We'll often, kind of assess a sales team or assess some sales managers and find out that maybe, half of them are highly trainable and, worth investing in, and the other half they shouldn't be in the role. So yeah, that can be a challenge. If you've got an owner, he wants to hire a salesperson or she wants to hire a salesperson, they're going to be the person managing this salesperson. But let's say we do an assessment on that owner and discover that they're going to be terrible at sales management, then that throws up a question, which is, well, who's going to manage this person?
Yeah.
Right.
Really difficult. You touched on something there around not everyone's trainable. I'm really interested in your take on that, because probably a bit of a round arm swing, but like, what percentage of people aren't trainable
in sales? Well, if we look at people who have been hired into a sales role and take that as our subset, it varies from company to company and industry to industry. But in our experience, and we've probably profiled thousands of salespeople over the years, I would say you could split them down into 3 groups. Half would be, I would say, an investable asset. and the other half, you're going to have, I would say, 20% that should never have been hired, and 30% that will improve, but it's going to be a slow journey. And therefore, the question is whether you've got the time and the money to take them down that slow journey.
Which, of course, leads you back to, it's really interesting. When you think about it, the message we get from industry in particular is got to invest in your people, got to give them time, got to, got to coach, got to train, got to develop them. But actually, the answer is got to identify whether they're going to benefit from that in the first place, and got to recruit better. Because if you recruit better and you've got a team of people that are trainable, then absolutely that's the right message. But if you've got 50% of people who are not trainable in your team, or worst case 60, 70 because you've hired really poorly, actually that's a lot of time and money that will go down the drain. Yeah,
it is, absolutely. And ideally, the half that are, let's say, in the wrong role would be, they would find an alternative role which is maybe more suited to them. And that may well be within the same company, or it may not be, but that, and that then, halves the cost of the sales team. And then with some of the money freed up, let's invest in the half that have potential to go from average to good, or maybe good to great, right? So then overall, we can be reducing the total cost of the sales team, but increasing the total output of that sales team, and actually getting from a smaller group. So that's the sort of journey that we've seen happen, on numerous occasions.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Let's flip it to the sales individual contributor themselves. What are you seeing salespeople that are excelling doing at the moment that poorer salespeople aren't, or perhaps the other way around? What are you seeing them not doing that poorer salespeople are doing?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of things. I think that poor salespeople sound like salespeople, and good salespeople don't. Right? I mean, people don't trust a salesperson, right? Yeah. In moment one, right? When your first interaction with a prospect, for example, you're at if you were at zero trust, that would be great, but actually you're at some kind of negative level of trust, right? So your first job as a sales professional is go from I'm at negative trust in your eyes to let's get back to zero, right? So that then we can maybe actually build some actual belief and trust, and fundamentally most salespeople sound like salespeople. And the reason they sound like salespeople is they're trying to get yeses from everyone, right? Let's do as many proposals as we can. Let's get as much in the pipeline as we can. I've got to try and convince everyone to say yes. So therefore, they're not having real dialogue with people, because who opens up to a salesperson, right? So the people who learn how to be effective in selling learn how to almost operate and act in a way that is kind of like the opposite to what a salesperson would do. So they actually generate some level of believability. They're not trying to get yeses. They're perfectly okay with a no, right? Because in many cases, a no is the right outcome, because then you're not necessarily a good fit for everyone, right? Acknowledging, so that I think good sales professionals acknowledge that they're not a fit for everyone. They understand that, so they're not trying to get a yes or a no. They're engaging in intelligent dialogue with another human being to figure out whether or not there's a fit, and whether or not you need what we do, and establishing what the right outcome is. And that might be a no, it might be a yes, it might be another meeting, but operating in a way where actually we're looking for the right outcome for everyone, rather than the right outcome for me. Yeah.
Really interesting. Do you know, we're on the same page with this sort of stuff. And there's this new, I say new, it's been around a while, but it's accelerated in the last 3-4 years around pattern interrupts at the beginning of sales calls, where people want to go in and say, I don't know, this is a cold call. Just so you know, this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up now, or do you want to give me 30 seconds of your time? And it's become really cool. It's almost as if this is the thing you need to do to be successful at the beginning of a cold call. I'd love to get your opinion on that.
It's a good question. What I absolutely believe is that if you do what 98% of cold calls still do, then you're going to get the outcome that 98% of cold calls get, right? So if the call is some version of, hi, it's Andy McCreadie, I'm calling from ABC company. The reason I'm calling you today is we've got this great offer for people just like you and blah, 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 right? Then that's not going to go anywhere. So doing something which interrupts that normal pattern is crucial.
Yeah.
Now, if that turns into something that's maybe a bit cheesy or a bit just weird, then that probably doesn't work either. But I think something that at least differentiates this approach, makes it more real, makes it more human, and actually engages someone and makes their ears prick up in some way that doesn't happen with other approaches. And this may not just be cold calls. It could be a LinkedIn approach. It could be an email. It could be an interaction at a networking event or a trade show or whatever, right? But there needs to be some way of interrupting that normal pattern. Otherwise, you're not going to get noticed or heard or go any further than the introduction.
It's almost a double bluff, isn't it? Because there's an argument to say you don't sound like a salesperson by saying you're a salesperson, because most rubbish salespeople want to hide the fact that they're a salesperson and therefore behave in a certain way. We categorize them anyway. So it's like, it's a bit confusing sometimes, but it's interesting to see the response to that for sure.
What's your view on that same question?
I think it will work really well for people of a certain personality, is my opinion. So what I would do in my training with our team here is that I'd always encourage trying things, full stop, because you don't know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So I'd always say, by all means, try it. But I think that has to be delivered a certain way, and it has to be delivered with a certain air of a bit of a swagger, a bit of confidence, without it coming across as too arrogant. And if you can do it with a little natural chuckle or laugh, that we know this is a little bit funny and we're breaking down a barrier, I think it can work well. But what I have learned over the years is that most people can't deliver it well, and what it ends up sounding is really flipping awkward. And I think, going back to your points, the reason I asked that question is because you talked about sounding like a salesperson, and I think if you don't deliver it well, it makes you sound more like a salesperson if you don't say it out loud. So it's a brave tactic that can work, but for the right person delivering it in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I made cold calls for years. I used to knock on doors on Marsh Barton, and I did. When I was my only salesperson, you probably did the same. And luckily, at some point you build a team, and other people are doing that. But in my experience, just something a bit more human and authentic makes sense. So examples of things I would say, and that certainly worked well for me, is in an introduction. If I called you, Owen, and you picked up the phone, and that sometimes you need to get past a gatekeeper, and that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? Or sometimes ideally we've been introduced. And by the way, that's as a short segue, that's a world of opportunity for most companies. They get reactive introductions because if they're good, some people refer them, right? And that's what we call reactive. But they're not proactive in seeking those introductions in a way that's professional and a way that's courteous, and that's a whole world of opportunity there. But if I'm making a cold outreach, and I was speaking to you, I'd probably say, Owen, listen, we don't know each other. I hope you don't mind me calling you. I don't know for sure that we need to speak. So shall I take 30 seconds? I'll tell you the reason I've called you in particular, and then you tell me whether or not you think we should carry on. Is that all right? Is that okay? Some introduction like that, which gives them, the opportunity to say no. It's a little bit more honest. I'm not launching into some long spiel. It's kind of permission based. And I know you guys believe in that same kind of permission thing as well. And I'm going to share something. I'm going to take 20 or 30 seconds. And if it doesn't resonate, they can say no and we'll park it. So something a bit more like a conversation between two people.
Yeah.
Versus some kind of, knife fight between a salesperson and some prospect who's thinking, oh my God, how do I get off this phone call, right?
And all they've got is a banana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Last question, and we might end up in a 5-minute conversation on this, and that's fine. I just want to touch on how you feel that sales is changing, because the last 3 and a bit years has been a world of change for business, full stop. And with that, I've seen sales leaders have had to evolve, perhaps much faster than they were before. And alongside that, you've got sales technology, the landscape moving, the ability to communicate digitally with prospects means that we get a very noisy world that we're competing in. There's all sorts of really rapid change happening in business generally and in sales. And that means salespeople have got to change. I'm just keen to hear how you're seeing people get ahead. What are you seeing people having to do more of or less of? And how is just sales as a profession changing over the last sort of 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a really interesting dialogue, and becoming even more interesting with people talking about AI and how that'll impact the sales profession, and will we even need salespeople? But I suppose a number of things. Obviously 3 years ago, Zoom or Teams or whatever virtual selling, immediately became relevant, and still is. And clearly salespeople in many cases need to initiate, progress, and close major deals virtually. And I think if people haven't adjusted and learned how to do that well, then that's a problem. I think that remote management is another major change. The days of a sales team, being in the office regularly, and having this team huddle on a Monday morning and a Friday afternoon, with remote working, and often the managers, everyone's remote, actually onboarding, managing, coaching those people, keeping them engaged in the business is a whole new challenge for sales leaders in many cases. I think buyers can be much more informed now than ever before, and sometimes they're further progressed in the sales process when maybe you engage with them, understanding where they are and where we need to kind of pick up the sales journey is crucial. So I think that there are some changes, but I also think there are some fundamentals that haven't changed. In unless you're selling, you sell online, and there isn't a sort of a human intervention. I think fundamentally, if there's a human intervention, whether it's B2C or B2B, fundamentally we need to somehow know how to build trust. We need to be able to engage people in a meaningful conversation where people are vulnerable, where we actually uncover real business issues or personal challenges which people want help with. And I think salespeople need to know how to facilitate that process in a delicate way. People need to know how to talk about money and qualify and progress and get to decision points in a mutually acceptable way, because it's so common that people have these huge pipelines full of deals that have been bumbling on for months and months, and so that ability to actually disqualify the wrong stuff, qualify the right stuff, progress it in a managed way to conclusions, whether it's to do business or not do business, and to develop what we call adult to adult relationships with prospects and clients rather than subservient relationships. Those fundamentals of good selling, I think, are there as much as they ever have been. And that's not changing this year or next or the year after, that's for sure. And I can't look much beyond 2 or 3 years, even that. Yeah, I'll focus
Love
on
it, love
2
it.
or 3 days.
No,
For the time being.
fully agree with you. Fully agree with you. And I think, you touched on that AI piece just now, and I think there's, like you said, whole other conversation around that. But people keep asking me the same question because, of course, particularly around cold calling and outreach, it's a really big thing. And my view is exactly the same. The whole time a human makes an emotional decision to buy, they'll be buying from humans, and that's the reality. The whole time that humans are making that decision based on, feeling as much as information, which is the way we buy, right? Do we trust this person? Does it feel right? All that sort of stuff. It's only when it becomes a data-driven decision alone can AI take over the whole sales process. And I don't think that's in my career. But look, by all means, if it changes, then we'll run with it, I'm sure. But for now, those fundamentals, I think you've hit the nail on the head, are not going anywhere, and they will be the requirement for every good salesperson right across the world. And the other stuff is nice to have and good to have, but without that, you'll go nowhere. And I think you make a very, very valid point.
I think you're right.
Andy, thank you so much. It's been really, really good to catch up and great to talk to you about this and unpick the world of sales and what's going on at the moment. We love to give our guests just a couple of minutes at the end, just to, just outline to our audience who you help typically, how you can help, and what's the best way for them to get in touch with you if they want to do so.
Sure. Thanks, Owen. So who we help, typically highly ambitious businesses who have meaningful goals for growth in revenue and margin. Where are they today? Typically they're between 500,000 and 20 million, I would say, is our sweet spot. We've some bigger companies and some smaller ones, but I think that's the zone where we have most impact. They sometimes have a small sales team, sometimes have a larger sales team. Sometimes they're thinking of hiring a sales team. But we also do a lot of development with managers and leaders to develop best practice in management. A good start point for people is to come to a session as a guest. We're always welcome people to come to like a taster or come and just get a feel for what we do. And if they want to do that, they can contact us at Sandler in Exeter, at Woodbury Business Park, have an initial chat, come as a guest to something, chat to a client, get a feel for what we do. And that's often a good start point.
Lovely stuff. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Nice to see you, Owen.